This lesson is on variables and expressions. For the first part of this lesson, we're going to talk about ways that we can translate statements or sentences into mathematical operations. So we're going to look at what words mean addition, what words mean subtraction, multiplication, and division. So first off, I'm going to just write down some things that I think of when I think of addition. So if you see, of course, addition is just the plus sign. So if you see the word plus, that obviously means addition. Another word that we use when we're talking about addition is the word sum. So if you see the sum of two numbers, then that means addition. Total. It's another word that means addition. And if you see more than. Now these are just a few that I have written down. Of course there are others, so I want you to be thinking of some others that could mean addition. Now let's look at subtraction. Subtraction is using the minus sign. So of course if you see the word minus, then that's going to mean subtraction. Sometimes they just use the word subtract. So it might say 5 subtracted from x. The mathematical term that we tend to use is called difference. So the difference of two numbers is 5. That would be an example. And then if you see less than, so 5 less than x. Another way that you'll see it is just less. So 5 less x. Now that means a little different, well, the order is going to be different when it says less than or less, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other word that I think of is just decreases. Okay, so again, these are just a few words that you might see, so I want you to be thinking of some as well. Okay, multiplication. Multiplication, we tend to use just an X. Sometimes we'll use an asterisk. Sometimes we'll use just a dot to represent multiplication. We could also use parentheses, and all of those mean multiplication. You might have a 3 on the outside of parentheses X. Okay. Some of the words that you might see are multiply, times, and the mathematical word that we tend to use for multiplication is product. So again, if you see any of those words, that's kind of a key that we're going to be using multiplication. Okay, division. We of course could use the division sign. We could also use this slash or forward slash. And then when you're writing a fraction, what I want you to do is when you're writing a fraction, I want you to do it stacked fractions right on top of each other. So this could mean 3 divided by 4. So the words that you might see are just the word divide. That of course is going to mean division. And then the mathematical word that we tend to use is quotient. Quotient. Make sure you write down that word correctly, spell it correctly. Okay, so I want you to be thinking of some other words that you could use to represent these operations, and we will discuss those tomorrow. Okay, now next let's look at some key terms or some vocabulary. A variable. A variable is a symbol used to represent a number in an expression or an equation. So something that you're going to see here, we often use the variable x. Okay, sometimes we use y. So those are the two variables that you'll see a lot in algebra. You might have a number out front, and we'll talk about what that is in a little bit. So 3x, this number right here, that's what you call a coefficient. and then of course the x would be considered the variable. Okay, another key term is an algebraic, get this word over here, an algebraic expression is a mathematical expression that consists of numbers, letters, and operations. Oops. Okay, so these are some key terms that you're going to have to know. So let's look at some examples. Now these are going to just be some easy examples here in the beginning. When you come to class, we're going to be looking at some word problems. So 5 increased by a number x. Well, increased by is something that you should recognize. That means addition. So when it says 5 increased by a number x, we're going to write that as 5 plus x. Okay? Now if we're going to go backwards and we see x minus 4, well, we have the minus sign there. So one way that we could write that is x decreased by 4. Now you might have another way that you could write it down, so I want you to think of another way that we could use the words that mean subtraction. How else could we write this? Then next, 5 less x. Okay, so be very careful when you just see less. Less means just subtract. So 5 subtract x is what that means. Now if it said 5 less than x, then what you would have to do is you would have to reverse this order. And so if it said less than, then you would reverse the order and you would put x minus 5. Because if it's 5 less than x, you would want the 5 to be subtracted from the x. Okay, 5x. How could we write that? Well, one way that we could write it is the product of 5 and x, because that means multiplication. Okay, now you might have another way that you could write it. What about the quotient of x and 5? Well, again, quotient means divide, so you would want to take that x and divide it by 5. The quotient of x and 5. Okay, that is all for our lesson tonight. Please make sure that you complete the WISC. I do take it for a grade, and I will see you in class.